where are the low value men? Like, what are all the low value men up to during these trying times? Because the high value men, I know they're around. They won't shut the fuck up. Low value men, I have not heard a word out of. I'm starting to think I'm on their side. I think I want one of those. I want a low value man. They don't make podcasts. I haven't seen one low value man make a podcast. Do they not know how to use microphones? Maybe that's a good thing. That's hot. All right, I've never seen a man use a microphone for good.
Until now, everybody buckle up. It's low value mail time with your host, Danny Polishchuk. What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of Low Value Mail with your host, me. I'm your host, Danny Polishchuk. We got an excellent episode for you on, what day is it today? January 24th, 2023. We got a good episode for you tonight. So, the topic, we're doing something a little different tonight. So normally I have a topic. Sometimes we have a guest. But so there was a gentleman. I was on Twitter. I saw a tweet from him. Something unrelated to the topic of this evening. I looked at his bio and something piqued my interest. And that was the man's name is John Ziegler. He's going to be joining us shortly. I will give a quick little bio of him. He is the host of The Death of Journalism and With the Benefits of Hindsight podcast. He's the former senior columnist at Mediaite. I believe that's how you pronounce it. He's a documentary filmmaker, radio talk show host, book author, and TV sportscaster. So I was looking at his Twitter, and he, the link in his Twitter bio mentioned, the link is essentially to his website, which is, I believe, framingjoepaterno.com. And essentially, it's all about the Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno case that I'm sure many people remember from, I'd say it was about a decade ago that it was mostly all adjudicated. But I had never seen this angle from it, because essentially what he's saying is that Joe Paterno got railroaded. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know that was, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth. We're going to speak with him directly, but there's a lot more to the story, I guess you could say. And I think a lot of our audience might be kind of interested in it. So I think like most people, of the impression this was kind of just an open and shut deal. I've spent the last 2 days consuming way more than I ever have on the topic. So we're just going to speak to him because it's obviously like a pretty sensitive subject. It's interesting too, because some viewers of the show, I mentioned today that he's coming on, and then a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania. And a lot of people, I guess this is maybe a more Pennsylvania-centric story in the sense that looking at, watching all of his videos and all these things, a lot of the comments are like, yeah, it's a lot of people, I guess, in Pennsylvania are not quite sold on the narrative. So normally, and he specifically wanted me to say, because I said it, and I said, I'm doing an episode on, we like to do like conspiracies, and he's like, it's not a conspiracy theory. And I'm not saying it's a conspiracy theory, but it does seem to have the hallmarks of a potential conspiracy. And I want to be careful with my words there, because I'm not saying it's a theory by any sense, because you can tell he's put a lot of work into this, and he's definitely put his ass on the line for all of this stuff. So just before anything, we have an after show tonight at 11 p.m. As always, if you want to sign up, you can do so patreon.com/lowvaluemail. Or on Locals, lowvaluemail.locals.com. And then we have a new episode of The Bathhouse tomorrow live at 10 p.m. from the Stand Comedy Club Green Room. So, and also there's now free trials on Patreon. Patreon just announced that they're doing free trials, so you can sign up for Patreon risk-free. We have a good time. All right. So without further ado, I don't want to keep him waiting. We're going to talk for a bit. And then I'm going to open up the phone lines, and if you have any questions for him, I'm also going to set up a question little thingy on YouTube. Shout out to everybody joining us over on Rumble. I do appreciate you all. So let's get him back. He's on hold. Resume the call. Sorry. One moment, please. And so, okay. Here we go. John, you can hear me? Okay, so thank you for coming on the show, John Ziegler is how you pronounce it? Ziegler's fine. Okay, so I came across, I think you had a tweet maybe about something, it was unrelated to this, but I gotta say that this whole thing definitely piqued my interest because I would say like probably most people are not aware that there's anything else to this story, the story of Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno. And here's a thing that I was, I guess, kind of surprised by is you have no real skin in the game here. You're not like you're not getting, you know, like there's no incentive for you to do this. It must be just you really truly thought that this is the truth, right? Yes. Sure. I could imagine, yeah. Oh, really? I watched that last night, actually. So you don't even have not even on good terms with her. Oh, sorry. Can you give me 1 second? Sorry. Give me 1 second. There's some people here saying that there's an issue with the audio. I apologize for that. Oh, here we go. Can you go ahead, John?
Am I not being? Are you
able
to hear me?
Yeah. Sorry. There was just some sort of issue there, but sorry. Continue on. Yeah.
So, there's absolutely no question that the real story here is so fascinating, and that is why I'm still on it 11 years later. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I wish someone had proven me wrong. I'd ask people to prove me wrong. No one can prove me wrong because I'm not wrong. I'm 100% right, and I'm positive of it, and it's not even close.
Okay, John, sorry. We had a little tech issue for a second, so some people didn't hear the beginning of it. I apologize, but can we just start over, just to go back 3 minutes from now. And I apologize for this because it's just whatever one of the sets.
Why are we doing this?
We're doing this for the show. The audio wasn't working, but everything's working totally fine now. I just wanted to introduce.
I abandoned my kids' dinner tonight.
I apologize. I do apologize.
I have my kids off of streaming, which they are very pissed off at me about right now. So should we just ditch the whole thing, or
no? We just have to just go back 3 minutes. Like my audio is fine, but I just apologize. But your audio.
I got on here early so that we could test that.
No, I know, and I did, but I know I apologize for that. It sounded fine on my end, but these streaming services occasionally have issues. I do apologize for that. But anyways, so just to recap the last 2 minutes, how did you get involved in this story about Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky? Like, how did you start going down this path? What led you down this path?
Well, since apparently the first statement I made was not heard, and I haven't yet decided to bail on this interview, which I might shortly.
That's okay. If you want to, it happens.
I will reiterate that I am not a conspiracy person.
Sure.
My version of this case is not a conspiracy theory. My critics are the real conspiracy theorists. I'm an ardent anti-conspiracy person. I do not believe that human beings are capable, especially in this day and age of social media, of being able to maintain massive conspiracies. Within the real story of what happened here, there are a couple minor conspiracies, but the main thing that happened was that this was a perfect storm, bizarre, perverse self-interest, and it had nothing to do with a massive conspiracy. No one set out to get Joe Paterno or Jerry Sandusky. It happened in a very natural and logical way if you understand the way the story went and the way that humanity actually works. As far as how I got involved.
Sure.
In November of 2011, I was a documentary filmmaker of some note. As a conservative, I had done 2 documentary films that had been very well received. The previous one had been debuted on the Today Show in a very contentious interview with Matt Lauer.
I saw that
on NBC. Yes. And so I was, I was in between projects at that point, wondering what I was going to do next. And I saw what was happening in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, where Joe Paterno was being destroyed by the national news media, alleging that he had covered up child sex abuse for a former assistant coach named Jerry Sandusky. Now, I had been very familiar with the Penn State football program because I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I had started my career as a TV sportscaster. I've also coached high school football in both New Jersey and California. I've covered college and pro football. I've been to Penn State football games, although rooting for Temple at Old Vet Stadium in Philadelphia. And the story made absolutely no sense that we were being told. And when I say that, I mean that from the standpoint of Joe Paterno. I presumed, okay, that's weird that Jerry Sandusky could possibly be this highly successful assistant coach, help Penn State win 2 national championships, and be there for decades, and nobody have any idea that he was doing this. That's weird, but that's okay. That's, I guess, possible. But the part about Joe Paterno, I knew there was no way that was fully true. And the story, for people that don't remember, what we were being told in November of 2011 was that a Penn State assistant coach, then a graduate assistant by the name of Mike McQueary, had at some point 10 years earlier, on a date that turned out to be totally wrong, they claimed at the time it was March 1st of 2002, had witnessed Jerry Sandusky anally raping what they thought was a 10-year-old boy in a Penn State shower, and then told Joe Paterno about it, and then Penn State basically did nothing about it. Now, that is a crazy, nonsensical, absurd story if you know anything about football culture, especially at Penn State. It makes no sense at all. Now, sometimes nonsensical things happen, but those things usually have some level of evidence attached to them. Sure. And this story clearly had no evidence. And so it had no logic, it had no evidence, and I did not trust the national news media, especially the sports media, especially ESPN, to be able to figure this story out in 2 days, which was basically what they were claiming that they had done, to know what the truth was, and for this to go down a path where justice was served. So I immediately said, okay, this is bad news. I knew that Paterno was in big trouble, but I also knew that there's no possible way this story is 100% true. It turns out he got fired just a few days after the release of this grand jury presentment, which we now know is full of lies, full of flat out total lies. The narrative as created by the news media was completely false. And Danny, I would suggest, to me, there's been a lot of ways to get people entered into this story in the right mindset. And I don't know, that much about your audience, but my guess is that for a lot of people, they ought to think about this as the sports version of COVID, or specifically with regard to like mask mandates. Like how the hell did we end up with mask mandates for 2 years when everybody knew that was always ridiculous, that masks don't work and that we live in a free country. We shouldn't be mandating masks. There's no evidence that they work. COVID is real, but the Penn State scandal was not. And
now, is there anybody else covering this like the way the side that you're covering it? Or were you like, because I haven't seen, like, you really put yourself out there, I will say that, to go after this. I mean, this is not like, it doesn't seem like this was without consequence for you to try and do this.
Well, I started, I guess you would say, because I interviewed Jerry Sandusky twice in prison for over 6 hours and then redid a full investigation of the whole thing. But I'm hardly alone. There are a lot of credible people who are in this same boat now. There's a former LA Times, Philadelphia Inquirer reporter named Ralph Cipriano who reports on it quite a bit. He and I actually worked together on a piece that was supposed to be the cover story for Newsweek until the very last minute when it got torpedoed. John Snedden, a former NCIS investigator for the federal government who investigated this case from the standpoint of the cover-up, he is totally convinced that Jerry Sandusky is innocent. There are other people who are unwilling to say publicly that Jerry Sandusky is innocent, but they know he is. Mark Pendergrass wrote a book called The Most Hated Man in America. He knows that Jerry Sandusky is innocent. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a chapter in his book, Talking to Strangers, which focuses a lot on my work. I believe that Malcolm Gladwell at least strongly suspects that Jerry Sandusky is innocent, may have even intended to write that in his book, but then either he and or his publisher got cold feet at the last moment and bailed on that. Frederick Cruz, a very esteemed professor at the University of California, has written extensively about how Jerry Sandusky is innocent. Elizabeth Loftus, maybe the world's foremost renowned memory expert, has testified on his behalf. And I know from my personal experience with her that she believes that Jerry Sandusky is innocent. There are other people that, frankly, maybe the most remarkable people involved in that group are some of the administrators. Gary Schultz, who went to jail for allegedly covering up Jerry Sandusky's crimes, although that's technically not what he was convicted of.
So he went to jail for covering up crimes, but then these were not crimes? But he never did anything. But I guess he was forced to plead guilty to a misdemeanor because he knew the jury pool was dead set against him because of 7 years of horrendous media coverage. But Gary Schultz has said on our podcast, with the benefit of hindsight, that he believes that Jerry Sandusky is innocent, and for good reason, because he's a key witness. He understands why the Mike McQueary episode that I referenced earlier was just not true, that it did not happen. He was the one that McQueary talked to report this back in what I believe was early 2000. Well, I know it was early 2000 because 2001, because they changed the date officially from March 2002 to February 9th of 2001, and it was a couple of weeks after that when Mike McQueary met with Gary Schultz, who I just referenced, and Tim Curley, the athletic director at Penn State. I believe that Tim Curley believes that Jerry Sandusky is innocent, although I've never had a conversation with him. And the former president of Penn State, who also went to jail after being convicted on a misdemeanor, I am positive, even though he won't say this publicly, believes that Jerry Sandusky is innocent. And his brand new book, In the Lion's Den, if you read between the lines even a little bit, it's very obvious that Grant Spanier believes that Jerry Sandusky is innocent. But this has become
so controversial and such a third rail issue that very few people are willing to give their true opinions publicly. And the news media, Danny, has absolutely, positively no interest in giving the other side any traction whatsoever, because they put all of their chips down on this story, much like COVID, just like they did with masks, just like they did with vaccines. They put all their chips down on this side of the story. And if they're wrong on this, it is a massive, massive, catastrophic embarrassment for them. And they just don't have it within them to be that kind of self-introspective and to admit when they're wrong, especially when the people telling them they are wrong are not massive celebrities, because that's the way the media works now. If you're not a celebrity, what you say doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Facts don't really matter. The truth doesn't really matter. Logic doesn't really matter. What matters is how many Twitter followers you have.
Right. And so what about, sorry to cut you off, but like, so what about all the, I mean, there were what, 4 victims who testified? But there were more than 4, but there were 4, like, I believe. Is that correct?
At Jerry Sandusky's very rushed Salem witch trial-like trial, there were 8 men who testified to some level of sex abuse against Jerry Sandusky. Most people think that it was 10. It was not 10, because 2 of the 10 were people who were quote unquote unknown. They were unknown because those episodes didn't happen. And in one of the cases, the McQuarrie case, they knew exactly who the so-called victim was, but that victim wasn't called to testify because they didn't like his story, because he very clearly and emphatically said nothing ever happened. And so that's why they didn't have him testify, although they told the jury, quote, his identity is known only to God. That was a direct quote from the prosecutor, Joe McGettigan, to the jury, which was obviously a falsehood and should be grounds, one of many, 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 many grounds for appeal in this case.
Yeah, because I mean, from what I gather, there. So does he have any? Is he? He lost his most recent appeal, I believe.
Well, Jerry has appealed many times in state court. By the way, that's highly unusual. There's so many things that are highly unusual, not unprecedented in this particular case. But the vast majority of serial pedophiles never get to an appeal because they confess, they plead guilty, they plea bargain, because they get, what gets found on their computer? Lots of child pornography. Well, none of that happened in this case because there was 0 child pornography. There was no attempt to plea bargain whatsoever. There was no confession. There was no guilty plea. There has never been a stoppage of any of the appeals. But all of these appeals are in the very same state that is as invested in Jerry Sandusky's guilt as anybody. They're as invested in his guilt as Dr. Fauci is in the vaccines. The reality is that he can't possibly get a fair shake in Pennsylvania, although he keeps trying. I believe he would have a heck of a case in federal court, but I think he's afraid that he had put his toe in the water of federal court last year. But now I think he's afraid that if he goes through and with an appeal in federal court and it fails, he's done. There's no place else you can go. You can't go back to state court.
But why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he try it? Isn't the alternative like he spends the rest of?
Because he's a very stubborn and naive person. He keeps thinking that somebody in Pennsylvania is going to understand just how incredibly corrupt and unjust his trial was. Because, by the way, even if he was guilty, which he's clearly not, his trial was a joke. It was a joke. It was a Salem witch trial travesty that occurred 7 months after his arrest, which is just with 10 different episodes to defend in the middle of a media firestorm. I mean, that's unprecedented. It's unbelievable that would happen in America. And in this particular case, that was particularly devastating because you had a jury pool that was not only highly polluted against him, but you had a jury pool that was effectively being accused of being part of the cover-up, because the prosecution narrative was that the entire community of State College and Happy Valley had looked the other way to defend football and allowed Jerry Sandusky to get away with this for all these decades. So the jury itself was invested like everybody else was, and even they acquitted Jerry Sandusky on 3 rather key elements of the case where if you used your brain and you said, okay, well, wait a minute, if he's not guilty on those 3 counts, then how could he be guilty on all these others?
Yeah, wasn't it like he was guilty on 46 counts? So is just everybody who testified against him? Because I think you say that he's completely innocent. It's not even like a gray area here. That's
correct. Although it took me a long time to come to that conclusion. My original perception was he must be guilty of at least some, or not most, if not all of this. And then I went to, after interviewing the first time, I said, okay, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe he's a pedophile, but he's a chaste pedophile, which is an actual real thing, because there was no belief on my part that he actually engaged in sex acts, but he did engage in very odd behavior. There's no question about that. And then as I got deeper and deeper into it and realized just how lacking in credibility every single one of these accusers is, I came to the conclusion that let me put it this way, Danny, the only people that lied at Jerry Sandusky's trial were the people that got paid well over $1 million for their participation in the case, which is everybody.
And paid by whom? Who was paying them?
By Penn State University.
And Penn State, what, just wanted this to go away? Or like, what was their incentive? I'm just trying to understand the different incentives for the different parties here.
Right. Well, the incentive structure in this case is paramount to understanding what happened. And they are perverse, and the media did not understand the incentives. Penn State's incentive is incredibly important to understand, because Penn State panics. They crap themselves in the middle of the media firestorm in November 2011. And they fire the great Joe Paterno and Graham Spanier, the president of the university, to extraordinary embarrassment. Now, if it turns out that they did that and Jerry Sandusky is innocent, how are the people that did that going to be viewed by history? How are they going to be viewed in their community, especially when Joe Paterno dies 2 months later, clearly as a result of what
he was like a god. He was like a god there, right?
So the incentive structure at Penn State is not just to make it go away. The incentive structure at Penn State is to self-flagellate and plead guilty to things that did not happen, because one, it gets them off the hook for having crapped their pants and fired innocent people, but also they're getting congratulated in the mainstream news media for doing this. The New York Times is applauding them for their self-flagellation. Oh, you're handling this so well by throwing football under the bus and getting rid of Paterno and Spanier and the administrators, and you're giving over $100 million to these poor innocent victims, and these guys were not poor innocent victims. Now there's a debate as to, were some of them convinced by therapists that they had been abused, and that they truly believed that they were abused? I guess that's possible. There's one accuser in particular, victim number 7, Dustin Struble, who Mark Pendergrass did an interview with for his book, The Most Hated Man in America. And Mark believes that Dustin believes that he was abused. And so I guess it's possible that this debunked form of repressed memory therapy was used on Dustin. But when I look, Danny, at the actions of the vast majority of the accusers in this case, it is clear to me that they are just flat out lying. And they are laughing all the way to the bank and to the local sports car dealership, where they have purchased many different very expensive sports cars with their money from Penn State, and bought very nice houses, and by the way, still all go to Penn State football games, wear Penn State jerseys, take pictures with members of the Paterno family, celebrate Penn State football at every opportunity on their social media accounts. These people lied.
And again, and is there any evidence of like these lies, or is it really just like a he said, like you know what I mean? In terms of, I guess not evidence of is not the correct question, but like, so you're just saying they were purely motivated by money, and after the Joe Paterno thing of him getting fired, they had just no choice but to go down this route. It just, I will say, for a lot of people, including people who are probably watching the show, and I'm sure this is your whole life, this is kind of an uphill battle for you, I would imagine, with this story, just because it's so toxic.
Most people don't. It's so incredibly toxic. But let me just explain how this happened, and maybe this will make sense to you. People think, at least that's my perception, that they think that, in a somewhat contemporaneous fashion, 1 week or 1 month, 10 boys came forward to say, I'm being abused by Jerry Sandusky. That's not what happened, even close to what happened. What really happened here was that this was a slow, very slow, 3-year grand jury investigation where nothing was happening. Nothing. They had one accuser by the name of Aaron Fisher, who was highly lacking in credibility and couldn't even testify to the grand jury, which is why the grand jury didn't indict Jerry Sandusky, despite 3 attempts by Aaron Fisher to tell his story. He finally tells it via a written statement with his therapist, a quack by the name of Mike Gillum, sitting right there with him in the grand jury room. It's not until the Mike McQueary story falls in their lap under highly suspicious, and you want to talk about conspiracies. I mean,
well, that's kind of why I reference conspiracies, because this seems like it has many hallmarks of.
Your conspiracy-loving audience will love this. So,
they are not loving this,
but so the day after Tom Corbett gets elected governor of Pennsylvania, the day after, suddenly there's an email that comes advising people to talk to Mike McQueary about whether or not he saw Jerry Sandusky with a boy in a shower. And that's how McQueary comes to their attention. And once they corral McQueary and get him to testify, now they have 2 weapons. They have Mike McQueary and Aaron Fisher, the 2 pillars of this case. And now they can go fishing. They have the bait and the hook. And guess what they also have, Danny? They have the names and contact information of hundreds and hundreds of former Second Mile charity members who are all at-risk kids, all of them. So these are now adult men who came from horrendous backgrounds, real abuse, real drug use, real poverty, real marriage problems, real unemployment, real financial issues, and now they can go fishing in this pool, and they can do interviews, which they did, with hundreds of former Second Mile at-risk kids. And guess what happens? They only are able to catch a couple, because a couple were able to figure this out and go, this is interesting. Wonder where this is going to go. And they got lawyers, the plaintiff's attorneys, who were key in helping manifest their stories into what turned into multi-million-dollar settlements. And by the way, Danny, it's not a coincidence that there are at least 3 of the core accusers of Jerry Sandusky who are very, very avid gamblers. In fact, one of them even refers to himself as a professional gambler. That's how he got his money, supposedly, was that he's a professional gambler. Because none of these guys none of their peer group knows that they are Jerry Sandusky accusers, because the media kept their names private.
So they're all the people who have, it was all sealed and they've never actually.
No, it's all.
But you know who they
now. It's just that nobody knows their names because the media had this bizarre rule that you weren't allowed to say their names. And so these guys can go along with their lives. Their peer group thinks that they're rich for weird reasons, whether it's a professional gambler or I own a trucking company or I'm a financial investor. But here's the reason why the gambling thing is important. These guys, their mentality was as a gambler. And they rolled the dice on this investigation. By the way, it's important to point out that many of them, their initial allegation was really somewhat ambiguous. It wasn't Jerry Sandusky raped me in the shower. It was something that they could have walked back if they needed to walk back.
There are some pretty serious allegations against him, though, like some pretty graphic stuff.
Absolutely, but not by all of them, Danny. And you're not following my logic here. If you're a gambler and you need money and you're smart enough to see where this could be going, and you put out there a story that fits within the realm of sex abuse, but it's ambiguous enough that you could pull it back if this doesn't work out, that's the way you would go down this path. And there are even two key accusers, who at trial say that very little actually happened. But then when it came time to get their money from Penn State, their lawyers realized that Penn State was paying based upon the horrendous nature of the allegations and how many times it happened and whether it happened on Penn State's campus. And then all of a sudden, and then I'm referring to victims number 3 and number 5, when it came time to get their money, their stories totally changed. And I have exclusively seen the settlement documents. They were leaked to me and to Ralph Cipriano. And that was one of the most shocking elements of the whole thing, that these guys blatantly perjured, by their own admission, perjured themselves. But they decided that they needed to amp up the story on steroids. And that might be even selling it lightly in order to get the most amount of money. And both of those guys got paid well over $5, $6, $7, $8 million by Penn State. And so here we are, we're living in a world where, Dateline NBC but $5 to $10 million isn't enough to tell a lie anonymously for a couple of hours in a courtroom, and then you're set for the rest of your life. I'm positive, because there's no evidence to back up any of these allegations. They all changed. None of them were contemporaneous. They're completely inconsistent. The timing changed constantly. None of them make any sense. And by the way, they're also not consistent with Jerry Sandusky's medical records, which we now have, which should have been put forward at Jerry Sandusky's trial. He had almost no testosterone. He had virtually no testicular matter. That's a direct quote from his medical records at the time of some of the most horrendous allegations. There's no possible way Jerry Sandusky did this, either psychologically or physically. And if he had, somebody would have mentioned the fact that he has no testicles. Nobody mentioned that because no one saw his testicles.
He has no testicles?
Virtually no testicular matter. That's directly from his medical records.
And so, okay, so we have a question here in the chat, and someone says, and I guess that's kind of what I asked at the beginning, but like, what do you have to gain from this? Nothing. Is there any sort of anything at this point other than just you're in so deep that you have no direction to go other than forward?
I realize it's very difficult for people in this day and age to believe that truth and justice in and of itself can be a motivation for someone to tell.
I mean, you're a journalist. I understand that.
And I will acknowledge, look, I'll be the first to acknowledge, if you had told me how this was all going to turn out when I started getting into it, I would not have gone down this path in all likelihood, because I'm not a perfect human being. I'm not the Mother Teresa of journalism. However, this is an incredibly important story. I'm 1,000% positive I'm right. Anyone that's looked at this objectively knows that I'm right. That's why we did an epic podcast. It's all been documented and with the benefit of hindsight. And so, look, I'm the first to acknowledge this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my career, maybe the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. And I've had a lot of bad things happen, but I can assure you it's not because I was wrong. In fact, the worst thing that happened here was that I was right. As I tried to say at the top of this, when we had some audio issues, the reality is I wish someone had proven me wrong. I asked people to prove me wrong. I wanted this burden off my shoulders, but there's no way to prove me wrong because I'm not wrong. I'm 100% right, and it's not even close.
But isn't some of the stuff that would prove you wrong just someone's account of something that happened?
No, because in order for an account to have any credibility, it has to be consistent. It has to make sense. It has to be corroborated in some way, shape, or form. And, Danny, I think you missed the part where I told you there has never been, if someone can find it, I will be thrilled, but they won't because it doesn't exist. There has never been a serial pedophile who in his mid to late 60s in the modern era was arrested and there was no pornography. None. Zero. Zip. Zilch. No pornography. No alcohol. No drugs. No payoffs. Jerry Sandusky never tried to pay anyone off to try to keep quiet. No plea bargain, no guilty plea, no stopping of the appeals. It's impossible. It is not the way a pedophile case works.
Did he not give? I was reading of one kid who he did give money to, like some sort of like regular stipend or something. That the guy said that's the gambler, I believe.
I'm not 100% sure which one you're referring to. Jerry did give gifts. Were not of the nature of a payoff for somebody who was being sexually abused. Dennis Hastert. Do you know who Dennis Hastert was, Danny?
Politician?
Dennis Hastert, he was the Speaker of the House
for
an extended period of time. And eventually he got found out to have been a child abuser when he was a high school wrestling coach. And why? Because he was trying to pay off his accusers in a way that sparked a federal investigation, because he was having to take out more than $10,000 at a time from his bank account, which triggers automatic red flag. And there were hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to be paid here. Jerry Sandusky gave these kids used golf clubs and used computers and $25 on their birthday. That's because he thought of them as their dad. That's what this was.
And what about the showering and stuff?
What about the shower thing?
Well, isn't there like multiple reports of all the? I mean, again, I guess these are things that don't look good. He's trying to be like, well, sometimes you just shower.
Jerry Sandusky. There are two episodes that I'm confident actually occurred where Jerry Sandusky was in a shower with a boy, and we can feel confident that happened. Once in 1998, once at the very end of 2000. Other than that, I do not believe that there is strong evidence. Now, I'm not saying it never happened other than those two times, but there's only two cases that those were documented. In the first one, the DA investigated it thoroughly and declared it to be an unfounded allegation and did not bring charges, which was the right call, because that person testified at Jerry Sandusky's trial some 14 years later. And when you read his testimony, Danny, it sounds like he's a defense witness, because he says nothing happened. Then the other episode is the Mike McQueary episode, where once again, Alan Myers was a boy, 13 years old, almost 14 years old, when this allegedly occurred. I believe on the actual date of December 29, 2000, which blows apart Mike McQueary's entire narrative, because it means Mike McQueary waited 6 weeks to report this to Joe Paterno. There's no possible way you wait 6 weeks to report a child rape to your head football coach and never mention it to police. That's not a possibility. And so Alan Myers' actions and words time and time and time and time and time again are 1,000% consistent with his statement that nothing ever happened that night or any other night with Jerry Sandusky, who he considered to be a surrogate father because he had no father of his own. In fact, at a senior high school football game, it was Jerry Sandusky who stood in as his father, and that was years after the alleged Mike McQueary rape episode. And there's just no possible way. I've seen Alan Myers eventually testify about this, and there's just no possible way Alan Myers was
it's wild that you're basically
essentially
he's either the biggest monster of all time or the unluckiest guy of all time. It seems like it's just funny. One of those two, and there's doesn't seem like there's middle ground.
It's funny that you say that, because I don't know if you recall, or maybe subconsciously you did remember this, but that's almost word for word what Bob Costas said to
maybe I watched
Jerry
that last night. Yeah.
Okay, well, Bob Costas, who I've gotten to know pretty well, I speak to him on a somewhat regular basis to this day, and I can assure you that Bob Costas does not think I'm a quack, and I personally believe Bob believes there's a lot of merit in what I say about this case. And Bob said that, and I've even congratulated Bob for that statement to Jerry in that interview, because I think that was a pretty good analysis. It's just that the media picked the wrong side there. They picked the nonsensical side, that somehow a guy could be a horrendous monster in that high-profile position for 3 or 4 decades and nobody have any clue about it, or say anything about it, or mark anything down in a journal or a diary, or ever tell a friend, or make a contemporaneous report, or have any semblance of physical evidence. It's just not possible.
Okay.
And to believe it, you have to believe all sorts of completely insane things that I believe are far more in the realm of a conspiracy theory than my version of this case, which I fully acknowledge is very, very, very much in the minority. But among people who have actually objectively looked at the facts, I'm in the majority on this case. When you talk to the people who have actually were involved in the case, I believe I'm in the majority of this case with regard to opinion. And I certainly have no, as you've already stated, I have no self-interest in doing anything but telling the truth here.
Okay, so let's we're taking a good amount of your time, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm sorry about the little gaffe at the beginning. So where do you go from here? Like it seems like you've kind of done most that you can do, I suppose. Like what is do you have any, like, because I saw that you had like a new version of your mini documentary, the Framing Paterno thing. There was like, you added onto it, and then like you have your podcast. Like, do you keep going? Do you have any choice not to keep going? Like what's the plan?
Well, for the record, I did that movie, the documentary,
like,
the Framing of Joe Paterno, which you can find on YouTube for free, no advertising. By the way, I've never done any advertising on any of my videos, not on our website. Until recently, there was no advertising on our podcast. With the benefit of hindsight, I have purposely lost money on this case. I've had no interest in making money from this case. Partially, I knew that it was not possible to make money.
Yeah, I don't know what advertiser's going to want to. Yeah.
But I also didn't want there to be any question about my motivations. And our podcast, with the benefit of hindsight, has been exceedingly popular. If we had run advertising on it, we would have made a significant amount of money. And instead, Mike Agavino, our producer, has, I'm sure, lost a significant amount of money on that podcast, and he deserves credit for doing that. But the reality is, that I don't know what the next step is for me. I would love to be done with this thing. The story doesn't fully end until Jerry Sandusky dies, and which, who knows when that could be any day. His sons think that he's in tremendous health given the circumstances, and that he might live to be 100, which means I only have another almost 20 years of this story. But I don't, look, we just lost Franco Harris, NFL Pittsburgh Steeler Penn State grade, who was a big part of this story.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I know that Mike McQueary was not telling the truth, and he was 72 and in great health. So
yeah, that was there not a thing where Franco Harris said Mike McQueary told him at Joe Paterno's funeral?
Yeah. In fact, if you go to my Twitter page every single day, I retweet the podcast that Franco Harris was working on just before he died. And in the section that I retweet, part number 3, Franco, in his own words, now he had done this with me, both on video and in our podcast with the benefit of hindsight, but I think it was different when he does it in his own words on his own platform. He tells the remarkable and incredibly important story of what happened at Joe Paterno's funeral when he confronted Mike McQueary mano a mano, man to man, a Pittsburgh Steeler and Penn State legend, coming up to Mike McQueary in the middle of this media firestorm and saying, "Mike, what the hell did you see?" And asking him several very pointed questions, and coming away not just wondering what the hell happened, but completely and totally convinced that Mike McQueary had not witnessed any sort of sexual assault. And if Mike McQueary did not witness a sexual assault, then the whole story collapses. What really happened was Mike McQueary, 10 years after this incredibly minor episode, got manipulated by prosecutors, and there were good reasons why Mike McQueary was very easily manipulated. He at first thought that the reason investigators were coming to talk to him was because he had been sending pictures of his naked penis to a woman, not his wife, through a Penn State phone. He also had gambled on Penn State football games. It's very clearly documented on YouTube in a game between Penn State and Rutgers, and he was very concerned about that. There are other reasons that Graham Spanier has alluded to in his interviews, and I believe in his book, that I can't divulge, that also would have had Mike feeling very vulnerable to manipulation by a desperate prosecution. And so Mike went along and he turned what was basically a brush fire into a 5-alarm fire. Actually, I believe he turned it into a 3-alarm fire, and then the prosecution turned it into a 5-alarm fire. They wrote it in that presentment. The media ran with it. And in everyone's mind, Jerry Sandusky had raped a boy in a shower, and that was just never true. And they should have known it was not true, because they knew who the boy in the shower was at that time, and the boy in the shower was very, 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 very clear that nothing had ever happened between him and Jerry Sandusky, who he considered to be, as I said earlier, a surrogate father.
Wild stuff. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate you taking the time for this.
I thought we were going to take calls.
We can take some calls. Yeah, you want to take some calls? Sure. You know what? Let me open up the phone lines here. I don't know which way they're going to go. I
don't care.
All right, phone lines are open, everybody. People have been calling actually throughout the course of this, but I didn't want to pick up because I wanted to. But so the phone lines are open if anybody wants to call in. I mean, that's the thing. People are like, "Why are you even talking to this guy?" Some people. But I'm honestly like, I think you had some tweets about like COVID or something. And then I saw your thing and I'm just like, I've never heard this side of this story. Like, this is one of the most.
And what problem do you have with my side of the story, Danny?
I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I don't know the facts, but I'd say most people are like, well,
what am I saying that doesn't make sense? What am I saying that doesn't make sense?
Nothing, to be honest. It's just it requires people to essentially go to take the side of a, like, you know, multiply convicted pedophile, right? Which is just like, it's radioactive. All right.
Which by the way is how this whole story went down. That's why we are where we are.
All right. We got a call here. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail. You're on the air.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? John, can you hear him?
Going pretty good. This guy has a very creepy take.
Do you have a question, or do you have anything to add here? Anything you want to ask?
I do. I have a question. How do you defend child rape?
Okay, we'll let you. And again, that's kind of probably what your whole. Like, I was second guessing even doing this, but I'm just like, it's just fascinating.
Danny,
you know what I mean?
You want to answer? You want to let me answer the question?
Yes, please do. Please
mean, right there is the essence of why an innocent man is going to die in prison. Because when you say something did not happen, you are not defending it. I think that's pretty damn obvious to any thinking person. But because of the nature of these allegations and the media coverage surrounding it, nobody used their damn brains. Nobody used the logical portion of their thought process. It's all emotion. And especially for straight men go crazy on this story for obvious reasons. I truly believe, based upon 10 and 11 years of speaking to people, that if Jerry Sandusky had nothing but gay men and middle-aged conservative women who had teenage boys as sons on his jury, he would have been acquitted, because both of those groups know this story is bullcrap because they have lived it from completely different perspectives. But a straight man has their brains blown by the allegations and say things that are stupid, like, how do you defend child rape? I'm not defending child rape. I'm saying it didn't happen.
Okay. Someone had a question. Illusory Commission says, do you believe that Jerry Sandusky ever conducted himself in a way that would now be considered sexual misconduct?
Well, you mean legally, or
I guess legally, which I
don't believe that Jerry Sandusky ever broke any crime then or now with regard to child sex abuse. I think he did some things that were very stupid, but people have to understand the context of how he did those and why he did those stupid things.
Sure.
Here's a guy who grew up in a very different generation, who grew up in a rec home where there was nudity everywhere, And these showers, I think you mentioned earlier, what about the showers? I think people need to see the showers. These showers are huge areas where we're not in tiny enclosed spaces where someone would be trapped. These are massive places where someone could walk in at any moment because they're not private. It's, anyone with the credentials to get into the Penn State locker room could have been there at any time. And in fact, with Mike McQuarrie actually did. It was not unusual when this time period occurred for kids to be taking showers.
We got another call here. Sorry to cut you off. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Why did you cut me off?
Oh, we had another call. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, there's one other important point of this, and that is that all these things happen before the Catholic Church scandal becomes a known entity, and that changes people's perspective. So everyone's seeing this through the prism of the Catholic Church scandal, but the Catholic Church scandal hadn't been known yet. And so people's actions were different before then, and you could be more naive and more stupid, like Jerry Sandusky was, before the Catholic Church scandal breaks years after these allegations were to allegedly occur.
Oh, okay. Understood. Yeah, that's it's tough to wrap my head around a lot of this. I went real deep into your YouTube and all this stuff. I saw your Piers Morgan interview where what was even the point of that? That seemed like almost early clickbaity kind of thing because he didn't seem to bring you on with any sort of real question. Actually, sorry, hold that thought. We got a caller right here. We got another caller here. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail.
Hey, Danny, I've got a question for your guest.
Yep.
First of all, I didn't get his name. Can I just? Oh, sorry, it's in your title.
John
here. Sorry,
Ziegler.
John. Okay, great. John, I've got a question for you, and can you tell me, are you currently or have you ever been employed by the federal government of USA, Canada, so FBI, CIA, CSIS, anything like that?
That's you care to answer that?
I can answer, but then I'd have to kill you.
Yeah. There's your answer. Okay. Well, it's 10:00 now. We hit the hour mark. John, I gotta let you go. I appreciate it very much. Your time. That was. Where can people find you?
The podcast is with the benefit of hindsight. I also do a current podcast twice a week called The Death of Journalism, and my Twitter feed is @Zygmunt
which
is IGMAN Freud.
Sure. All right. Thank you, John. I really appreciate you taking the time out for this, and tell your kids sorry that they couldn't stream while we were doing this. I do apologize.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your fairy tale, everyone.
All right. All right. That was John Ziegler, everybody. I can't tell if by the end of it he was like, why the fuck did I do this? But that, I gotta say, I'm trying to just switch some things up with the show. Not switch things up, but you know what? I just saw this and I go like, that would fit perfectly with the episode. All right, we got a call. We got another caller. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail.
Hello, this is Bill Cosby.
John's gone.
I'm calling to see if Jerry Sandusky is going to be released from prison.
All right, thanks, Bill. You know what? I kind of forgot that maybe the audience is not the right. I don't know. You guys can let me know if you like that or not. It was just something. Sorry, everybody. If you didn't like that, don't worry. This is not the show now where I interview people. Like, I'm just, I'm trying to switch things up. I like the guy. Honestly, he's got a good Twitter feed. Go check out his Twitter feed, Zygmunt Freud. He's pretty good. In that sense. But yeah, it's one of those things where I was watching it. I was like, this is such a crazy hill to die on. And it seems like he really regrets ever going down this path. Now, do I regret going down this path? No, I do not. This episode is about conspiracies. He was, made a point to say these are not conspiracies in that sense. I think honestly, I can't tell. I was looking at the chat. Everybody's like, hang up on this guy. Not everybody, but then some people think you like it. I don't know. You let me know. It is, I will say, one of the hardest. If you have any questions, you have anything you want to, any input on the matter, please call in. Let me know. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about this in general, because this is a spicy topic. Also, I heard that there was some lag on here, and then I felt it started off on such a bad foot because the audio was all off. But anyways, I feel like it's hard to even pivot into, hey, check out these other, do you have any other conspiracies you want to talk about? But the phone lines are open, 646-710-0949. I wish I asked some more questions. People are asking, Tony P says, can you please recap the argument? He basically has dedicated the last 10 years of his life to the fact that Jerry Sandusky is in fact not guilty of certain charges, but he is entirely innocent. And it was like this whole crazy thing. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail.
Hey, Danny, it's Will.
Will, how's it going, man? Okay, we got a lawyer. All right, here we go. Will, what do you think about all this? Will, the lawyer.
So I got to say, I don't really recall all of this. I was maybe like 16, 17 when all this was happening.
Yeah, because this was like the biggest story in the world when it happened.
Yeah, I was 16 when I was really watching the news, but I will say, in my experience, I will believe pretty much any prosecutorial misconduct story. And like he's saying, that really is what this comes down to in the end. I've worked for the Innocence Project. I've worked for wrongful convictions. I've worked in police accountability in the city of Chicago. Prosecutors are scumbags.
Yeah. I did a podcast recently, actually, with, I can't remember his name, but he has a big podcast. I think it's called like The Boneyard right now. And it's about this guy in Florida who, is like, they know he's not guilty of, basically murder. Like they know it for a fact. Someone else has, and they have all this evidence, but like it requires the prosecutors in some small town to admit that they were wrong. And he's just like, they won't admit it. So this guy's just like sitting in jail and they won't let him out.
No, it almost reminds me of the story of Carrie Max Cook. He was wrongfully convicted in like West Texas, out in the middle of nowhere. As like, he was a bartender at like a gay bar, straight guy, but he bartended at like a gay bar at night. Okay. And one morning he wakes up for work. There's like police or whatever, like all over his like apartment complex. Like, oh yeah, like, the lady and, 2B died. And it's like, oh shit, like that's terrible. And like, heads out for the day. And then the cops and the prosecutors throw together this crazy story that like he went into a homosexual rage and like mutilated her body and like cut her to pieces. Meanwhile, some like professor at the university was having an affair with this woman. And they just asked him, like, hey, did you do it? And he was like, no, not at all. Anyways, Carrie Max Cook ends up spending like 20 years on death row before he's exonerated.
Yeah, this guy's name is it's called the Bone Valley podcast, and the guy's name is Gilbert King. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, I believe. I'm not sure where I believe he's like several different ones, but yeah, he covers this guy who's essentially he's innocent. He's like, there's no question this guy is innocent and they won't let him out.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say like all prosecutors are terrible.
No,
but
obviously not.
Some of the scummiest people, they go towards that sort of like nexus of power. It's great for politics. I tried to look into actually the Jerry Sandusky prosecutors to see where they are now. And I guess like one of them just got like his license suspended for like a year, like 2 years ago. And the other prosecutors who were on this case were trying to like get his license reinstated or whatever. So it's like this close-knit cabal.
That's what
where,
this
like,
guy,
all these people kind of know each other.
Gilbert King said this exact same thing. If you listen to the podcast I did, or he's on other podcasts, but that's exactly what he said. And this is related to a different thing in Florida. But I think with the Sandusky thing, everybody's like I've never Like I've heard, different sides of many things, like the other side of like a lot of things that everybody is like pretty agreeable on. But this is just one I'd never heard the other side of. Like I'd never heard that there was another side of Jerry Sandusky.
Yeah, again, it's not one that I ever knew very much about, but there have been other cases like that. There was in Virginia, there was like I want to say it's like the Roanoke 7 or something, or Roanoke 8.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it's a bunch of like Navy guys who supposedly raped and murdered a woman, and they like got one guy and they basically just like, interrogated him for like 13 hours until like he gave up his roommate just to get out of it. And they kept like getting these guys to confess, DNA tested them, and then it came back not as theirs. And the police are in interviews being like, oh, well, like every time the DNA came back negative, it was like she was telling me there's still more out there. There's still more out there. And they have like 8 guys all on the hook, not admitting any of them were wrongfully convicted.
Right, because they have to, it looks bad on them. The guy's name's Leo Schofield, and he's currently sitting in prison in Florida for like a murder that this guy's certain he did not commit.
No, well, the crazy thing about this Virginia one, too, is they made a documentary about it, about how they caught all these guys in their conspiracy. And so now they have all this footage of the police just being like, yep, we did our job. Like, we got those bastards. And then now, like, they redid the whole documentary being like, oh, actually, they messed up horribly and ruined these guys' lives.
Yeah.
So, like, if the whole Jerry Sandusky thing ended up being media sensation mixed together with prosecutorial misconduct and
I mean, the thing is with this guy,
motivations.
John, it's like John, like the guest, is like you can tell, like this probably like kind of fucked up his life to go down this path. Like I can't, like he said it himself. I was going to ask him, like, do you regret doing this? But he said it in, no uncertain terms. He's just like, yeah, I kind of like. But then now,
that's why I ended up doing corporate law, because I worked for the Innocence Project and stuff and some other things in like law school and whatnot, and I was like, oh, this is gonna consume me.
Sure, but it's different to like. It's one thing to be like, hey, someone's like a murderer and it was like a racist, like, it was like they were a victim of racism and that's why, like, you could get on their side without anybody being any like blowback. But this is just like, it's an old white guy who literally was like accused of raping kids systematically for 40 years. Like, how were you supposed to be like, you know what? I think there's something going on here.
True, though. When I was working with the Innocence Project, it was my undergrad in Texas, and Texans are kind of like that for any accused criminal a little bit. They're like, oh, like they think he robbed the store. Why isn't he hanging?
Right. But I mean, I guess it's like if you were to do like a podcast about, like for example, this guy who I'm talking about, who I did the podcast,
the Boneyard,
Bone Valley podcast or whatever, like Gilbert King. Like he's not like, oh, my reputation's at stake because I'm trying to get this murderer out. Like he's
right.
Not
Obviously, the Sandusky thing's a higher profile.
The Sandusky thing is just like so radioactive that he's just involved. I mean, I almost didn't even. Like, I was having second thoughts about even just, like, having him on to talk about his shit, because I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and even me, like I said, I wasn't that tapped into it, but, like, I know that I've watched, like, Law & Order SVU episodes that are based on this. And kind of like he said, like, they don't really make that much sense, like, but, like, there's just this inclination of, like, oh, like, it's so steeped in now, it's so baked in.
Yeah.
That people don't like second guessing things once they've kind of accepted them.
No, and I guess in this, and he does make like reference, like parallels to like, because I guess the Catholic Church scandal was kind of blowing up simultaneously at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I still think, and I'm going to put a poll in the chat here. Not that this is means anything, but I'm going to put a poll to see if people think does this change their mind at all.
Yeah, like he makes a compelling argument, I'd say, and I'm already predisposed to disagree with prosecution. I don't know much about this particular case one way or the other, but if you tell me prosecutorial misconduct, my default presumption is going to be, yeah, of course.
Interesting. So, and that's coming from someone who is an attorney.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, William. How's the pool table? We get it yet?
No, not yet. I realized I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and there's just absolutely no room in here for one.
Yeah, the lady won't allow it. All right, William. I appreciate you calling in. Thanks very much.
No problem, Danny. Talk to you later.
Take care. That was William. Everybody. So I put up a poll. Does this change your mind at all? So I'm not saying, do you think he's innocent? I'm like, does it change your mind at all? Currently, yes, 41%, no, 57%. So, you know what? It seems like some minds have been changed. This guy's like the fucking modern day Steven Crowder. Hello.
What's up, Danny?
The Goob. How you doing, buddy?
Man, I backed the right horse with William Tresh. That guy's a cool guy.
Yeah, William's the man. I like William.
Yeah.
If I ever get in legal trouble in Illinois, even though I know he's not a criminal attorney, I'll certainly call him up.
I also agree with everything William said and think that it's a very emotional thing. Like the guy said, like just the accusation of, like you said, systematically raping kids. You don't need evidence at that point for most people. Like just that accusation, people are going to want to lynch the guy.
Sure.
And that's like what you saw in the chat.
Okay. So people were getting fired up. Like the amount of messages we were like, just hang up on this guy, like literally just like hang up on him. Now you are like pretty steeped or not steeped, but you know about a lot of conspiracies. Like you've told me about a lot that I've never heard of. Had you ever
I've seen enough. No, but I've seen enough trials. Like I have watched some of these trials, especially the high profile ones, and what you see on the news and what actually happens in the courtroom are completely different. So like it's 100% believable that the news was, just saying he's guilty. And then if you actually watch the trial, you're like, oh yeah, this is all bullshit. Like that's 100%. I didn't watch this trial, but that's 100% believable.
Yeah. I mean, I still like even him saying all this stuff. I don't know if there's I can't even explain it, but I'm still like hesitant to even like allow myself to believe, even though he says he's like there's he seems like I've barely looked into this besides watching his YouTube videos, right?
Yeah, I don't have enough information to have a real opinion other than it's absolutely possible.
Sure, it is possible.
Right.
I guess that would be a fair thing to say, is that it certainly is possible. And like I didn't know that, like he's never even admitted an ounce of, like he's never admitted one thing ever. Jerry Sandusky, like he's never said like I did any of these things, which is crazy. But again, I guess a lot of criminals will be on death row and having done murders and be like I'm an innocent man. So,
all right,
I don't know.
You needed to ask about the balls. That was the one thing you kind of dropped there, man.
Drop. Thank you, Goob. Yeah, moments pass now, but
yeah, the ball. That was interesting. He doesn't have balls.
Yeah, I go. That's. I think like he just told me that, and I was like, I think I just got fried there for a second. Where I was like, he doesn't have balls.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and again, I don't know. Does not having balls mean you're incapable of being a pedophile?
No, but I think he made a good point with like no one mentioned that.
Sure,
you would think, right?
Yeah, you would think these are all pretty known things. Like if you go on I went on Wikipedia and read the whole Wikipedia. Not saying that that's a source of anything, but I'd say like that's like what the mainstream narrative would be, and that's not on there. There's no balls. Like most of the stuff he says not on there. Understandably, I wouldn't expect it to be, but.
Do you want to completely change subjects and talk about a crazy conspiracy?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot about the pedophile guy. So, a fun one that I've found recently is, how everyone's afraid of clowns, right? But, like, people aren't afraid of mimes. And so, like, there's, like, something in our DNA that, like, makes us afraid of clowns.
Well, it's because mimes are inherently French, and what is that scary about something French?
That is also true. But so also if you look at a lot of Indian cultures around the world, so if you type in Selknam, SELK apostrophe NAM, and like clown,
SELKM apostrophe MAN,
NAM,
clown,
right? Yeah, and you'll see images like they were an Indian tribe in South Argentina, real close to Antarctica,
the
and they had
clowns?
clown gods that they worshipped. And then there's the Hopi Indians who also worshipped clown gods. And there's a bunch of other Indians that worship clown gods. And like even in some of the African tribes.
I've never heard of clown gods before.
Well, their gods look like clowns, right?
Oh.
If you're looking at these images that you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. They look bizarre. One of them looks like a penis.
Yeah.
Kind of has this
maybe.
weird penis head. Or maybe like a squid.
And there's even like cave drawings of like that look like clowns and stuff. So the conspiracy is that clowns are what Nephilim, like the half angel, half human, or half giant, half human, half alien, half human, whatever you want to believe they are, right? Of the ancient world. They looked like clowns, and like some of them were evil, and that's why people are afraid of them. And that's why like you find them in the all across the world in like Native American cultures.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I never heard of these. They look wild though. They have like these stripes. They like have these like chalk stripes.
So the Selknam, the Hopi, the Pueblo, the Karasan, and there's like a bunch of other Indians in different places that all have similar looking.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? I'm gonna put a pin in this, and we'll look into it a little more on the.
That's all I had.
On the after show. We're gonna check out some of these clowns, these clown gods.
It's a fun theory.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
All right, bye. The Goob, everyone. That was the Goob. The poll right now, does this change your mind at all? At all, the emphasis about Jerry Sandusky, currently 60% no, 40% yes. So it's not insignificant, other than the fact that it's a small sample size. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail.
Danny, what's going on?
What is happening? Who am I speaking with?
Hey, it's Dylan from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Dylan from Milwaukee. How's it going, man?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm good. So what did you think? Do you have something else you want to talk about, or you want to talk about the guests?
I want to talk about more miscarriages of justice within the sports league.
Sure.
I'm here to talk about O.J. Simpson.
Okay.
And
wait, are you saying O.J. Simpson was a miscarriage of justice?
He's not. Well, I get. Yeah, that was. No, you're right. I'm sorry. That was a bad poor choice. So I
guess theoretically you could say the miscarriage of justice if you're saying that he was truly innocent of the murder. He's not a murderer. Well, I know, but then that would be the. I guess because they convicted him for the robbery or whatever, and they sent him to like the max in jail, and some people said that was, in another sports reference, a makeup call.
Yeah, no, he's guilty of that. I mean, he's not a good guy. I don't want to put that forth. He's not a good guy.
Sure.
He's definitely an abuser and a thief.
Do you have an opinion on who did kill?
Yeah, I think it was his son Jason.
That's what someone says in the chat. Mavsami41 says it was OJ's son Jason.
Yeah, no, I'm with him.
And yes. So do you think that
another guy, Corey?
Yeah, his friend or something, right? OJ's friend?
No, I'm sorry, another guy in chat, Corey.
Oh, another guy in chat. Sorry. Do you think OJ covered it up and knew that it was his son?
Yes, absolutely.
So
one of the first things OJ did was hire a defense team for his son.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. So what is the story here, that his son just killed his mom and Ron Goldman?
Yeah, well, pretty much Jason, at this time, he had a history of drug abuse. It's said that he started using like ecstasy, cocaine, and he started drinking at 14.
Damn.
He had 3 recorded suicide attempts at this point. And the most important thing really is at this point, he had 3 knife assault charges, 2 of them on 2 ex-girlfriends, and 1 of them he was on probation for attacking his boss with a kitchen knife.
Crazy. I did not know that. So
yeah,
you
so
think
he was
that,
real violent and unstable.
Did he have CTE
And that was his
too?
stepmom, and he really didn't I mean, when you have a stepmom, you can kind of be like, oh, that person took my father away from my real mom, and there's always that resentment, a little resentment.
He's currently the head coach of a football team.
Yes, I have heard. I've heard
he's
doing a little better now.
At the University of
No,
Tennessee
actually, no. That's actually a different Jason Simpson.
Oh, that's not the same Jason Simpson.
Yeah, Jason Simpson. I don't know what's going on with him actually, because I looked that up too, and I had that. I was like, "What? He's college football coach?" And then it was a white guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what Jason Simpson is.
Okay, there's an article here that I have.
Zach, I see you in chat. Yes. OJ was violent, but he's never had a weapons history. He never had a history of using weapons.
Sure. But do you think that the history, like, I'm sure there's a lot of, I guess the way that the OJ thing was trying to be framed was it was like a quote unquote crime of passion, which right. I would think generally there would not necessarily, or at least in historical crimes of passion, I could be wrong, but there wouldn't necessarily need to be a history of that specific, because it's by nature, it's like an emotional, like reactionary thing in the moment.
And that's why I wanted to say, like, I'm not saying OJ is like a great man and he's not an abuser. He's definitely done a lot of messed up stuff, but I don't think he's a murderer. There was this investigator. His last name was Deere. I forget. I think his first name's William Deere.
Okay.
Who like bought an old storage locker from Jason Simpson.
Yeah.
And he found a knife that matched the description of the murder weapon on the scene.
What?
In the storage locker.
No way.
And it's not even the blade that matches. It's not even just the blade. Nicole Simpson had an injury on her forehead. That was like somebody hit her with the butt of the knife.
Yeah.
And they matched the butt of the knife to that wound as well.
Damn, that's wild. That I'd never heard of. I think I've maybe heard something about the son having done it and OJ covered it up, but I didn't know the storage locker stuff. That's
Yeah, there's actually that I forget if his first name's William, but I'm pretty sure his last name's Deere, and like he did a whole. He's like done like a whole, like he spent years of his life investigating, and William. Jason. He's actually he's also had a history of taking knife fighting classes at the Army and Navy Academy.
Really?
He has no alibi when the murders took place. The amount of DNA that was found at the scene that matched to O.J. Simpson covers up less than half of your thumbnail. So, I mean, like, if you're going to talk about your ex-wife's home, like, obviously... or your wife's home, obviously you're going to have some DNA there.
Sure.
I think if you murdered her, she would have your DNA under her fingernails. OJ actually did a strip search for the LAPD the day after the attack. He had no signs of physical marks on his, and he was completely naked. He had no signs of physical distress on his body. And that Ron Goldman guy was a black belt martial artist, and he had signs of like attacking, like fighting back.
Yeah.
So like he had bruises all over his hands and arms, and OJ didn't have a mark.
Did they find the son in like?
Jason was never questioned or suspected.
Really? So he could have had these injuries, and they would have healed.
They never looked at him.
Yeah. Someone says Zach Hayes says cut on OJ. Did OJ not have a cut on his hand?
I've never heard that he had a cut on his hand.
I don't know.
But maybe he did.
I don't know.
But there's just way more physical evidence that he didn't do it.
Interesting. I will say that is one of those things where it's like the narrative that just everybody's kind of just gone with. We go, OJ did it, and that's it. And I've honestly never heard someone say OJ didn't do it. Either people say nothing or they say he did it.
I think he's innocent, and if the glove don't fit, Danny, you must have quit.
Yeah, you do. All right, thanks for calling.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, take it easy.
All right, that's an interesting one. That's a very interesting one. Yeah, Norm Macdonald. He Norm was going real hard on the fact that OJ was a killer. I mean, maybe one of the greatest jokes of all time is at the ESPYs. With was it Desmond Howard? Where it was like, Desmond Howard won the Heisman Trophy. That's something they can never take away from you, unless of course you murder your ex-wife and her boyfriend. Then they will definitely take it away from you. Hello,
yo, Dan. It's Maurice.
Maurice, how's it going, buddy? How you doing, man?
Doing good. I do want to say, don't want to discourage you. I think guest episode would be good. But I think that Chad just turned on the guy when he kind of like talked down on you after the tech issues.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was my fault. I did ask him to come in 5 minutes before specifically so we could set it up. And then there's just like this one toggle on this one fucking thing. And because I don't have a producer, I just was like, oh, and I wasn't looking at the chat. And then I was like, and then I saw the chat. And then, I mean, I did feel kind of bad. I messaged him. He didn't message me to like come on the show. I specifically was like, hey, you want to come talk about this shit?
Yeah, because when I saw you post it, I was actually excited. Like, oh, let me hear some crazy shit.
Yeah.
But the fact that, like, if your entire thing is talking about something crazy, you think it would be like as friendly as possible to draw people in.
I mean, you know what? It's I honestly appreciate. Like, I understand where he's coming from or whatever, but, like, he probably doesn't get, like, a warm reception when he talks about this. Like, go look at his interview with Piers Morgan. They're just fucking yelling at each other.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, like, it's like let's just say that he's right, okay? Let's say he's completely right. Jerry Sandusky is completely innocent. Like, he doesn't even get anything out of this other than mostly just, like, aggravation and, like, this is just like, fucking up his life. But he's at the point where, like, I haven't been anywhere with,
And his kids are pissed at him tonight, too, so he's
I'm sure the whole thing. You know what? Like, I'm sure as someone, like, he's a journalist, I'm sure if he's trying to get, work or whatever, like, people look him up and you're like, oh, this is the guy who defends Jerry Sandusky. Like, he can't probably get hired at a lot of like normal places.
Yeah.
Like because of like, just that. Like it's one of those things where it's probably like, it's just so, like I said, so radioactive. But yeah, it is like, again, like I said, I mean, I've said it many times, but when I saw this link and I was like, I've never heard in my life the other side of this, that anybody was like saying, oh, he's not even that he wasn't not like guilty of certain things, that he is completely innocent. I just couldn't believe it. But imagine,
I never heard that either.
Like imagine that there's this, whatever chance that that's actually true, and he's like, he's certain of it.
Yeah, and I do agree with like what Will and like the Goob, that like, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it's like 190 people have been proven innocent after they've been given the death penalty and executed.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, our justice system is supposed to have like, without a doubt, you're guilty. But like, obviously that doesn't really exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's more that like he kind of came off as a dick and everybody.
I know. He did it first. And I don't know. I did feel a little bad because I was my mistake. But yeah, and I was like, hey, can you repeat all the things you just said for the last like 4 minutes?
Yeah.
But so what do you think about the how old are you, Morris?
I'm 29. I mean, I was in high school and so like I really wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
I just figured it was just like, oh, some like a normal, like I guess quote unquote normal pedophile thing. It's like, yeah, that was a thing, whatever.
Sure. I mean, it was crazy because like Paterno was this god at Penn State. Like he really was this like untouchable guy, and then they just like fired him. And